welcome back to Compassion and Company. I am here with Esteban Palacio, also known as El Niño. He's a local Vancouver hip-hop artist. So Esteban, tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I really appreciate it. Well, I grew up in North Vancouver, I make hip-hop music. I also study psychology. This kind of broad overview of who I am. But I'm also deeply interested in the topics of the human psyche, the human condition. Mm-hmm. And for today, self-compassion. I'm excited to get into it with you.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's dive in. So what does self-compassion mean to you?
I'm going to be real to everyone listening and to myself. I had to Google search that before I came onto the show because maybe I don't think about self-compassion enough. And truth is, when I saw the definition and everything, I kind of recognized that for a long time in my life, I really wasn't very compassionate with myself. I was raised in a household where the reality was you had to do everything the best that you can because my parents knew that I had it in me, but in that same respect, maybe we weren't always very relaxed with ourselves, and we always expected a lot. So nowadays, I think self-compassion for me means setting boundaries and acknowledging that I don't always know everything, that I don't always have to do everything, and that I'm not always going to do everything perfectly, but that doesn't matter. And that I guess that big thing for me is setting boundaries on my own expectations from myself and just knowing that I have worth outside of my relationships with other people. I think that,
Yeah. So it's a lot of self-patience.
Yeah.
And just kind of giving yourself that room.
Yeah, straight up. Because I think you can wallow in your own self-pity, or you can also be very hard on yourself. And I think self-compassion for me is not doing those things or finding a way to establish boundaries to prevent myself from kind of wearing myself out, or just, practicing self-love as well in that respect. And not I don't know, not being a downer of my own self, A lot of times, even myself, being an artist and a student and all that, I think a lot of times if I don't perform or if I don't get as many streams as I wanted, or if I didn't get an A on that project or whatever, sometimes I have a tendency to attach my self-worth to that, and I think that was a mistake that I was often making. So self-compassion is now understanding that outside of my accomplishments, my worth is still there as a person, and that myself extends beyond that little project or that grade.
Do you think there's a link between productivity and self-compassion for you?
Absolutely, yeah. I think just in what I'm involved in, being productive seems to be something I have to be into a degree. I can't just be I can't be sitting around. I can't not be moving. I can't not be making music, coming onto podcasts, just being productive with my time. But at the same time, right, there's this line where if you think that you have to do something every single day and you can't give yourself a day of rest and you can't enjoy your life and you can't enjoy yourself and your own company, then you start falling into a bad pattern where your worth becomes attached to your productivity.
Yeah, so it's kind of you're seeking self-validation from external things rather than in who you are.
Yeah, straight up. Yeah, definitely.
How do you think your identity, as a person of color, has maybe informed the way you understand self-compassion?
That's, obviously, given everything going around and being from Colombia, it's always been an interesting situation for me. Actually, I didn't realize I wasn't from here for a long time as a kid until it felt like people tried to make it apparent to me as a child. And I remember that was weird because as a kid, I was I'm Canadian. I was I live in Canada. I'm in school with everyone else. But then I got put into ESL, which I thought was absurd because I spoke English better than most people actually.
Yeah.
And I was oh, I'm in here. They're you weren't from here. And I was and it started to become aware that I wasn't like other people. And then I actually really early on in my life, I changed my name to Stephen instead of Esteban because I just I couldn't handle the fact that no one could say it, or like it felt like everyone was like, making fun of the name. And I had a hard time, like, finding myself and trying to fit in. And in that respect, as I grew up and became more apparent of my race and the fact that I wasn't necessarily the Canadian white normative, I actually felt like a lot of, like, I don't know, self-hate, I guess. And it became hard to be compassionate for myself. In fact, I think I dwelled in a lot of pity. I hated my curly hair. I hated the fact that I didn't have blue eyes. I didn't like that I wasn't tall. It's as if I chose every single characteristic that makes me Colombian and said, I hate that about myself, because it seemed like everyone else didn't have those things, and I just wanted, as every kid does, I just wanted to fit in.
Yeah.
But in all due respect, that kind of stuff, obviously finding myself as I got older, and obviously just finding like confidence and maturity, I love being a person of color. It's funny because nowadays I'm so happy that I am. It's one of these things I'm like, oh, thank God that I got to have this lens where I understand the other and I get it. I've been in that situation. I've been the other, and I get what it feels like to have maybe not enough media representation or whatever it might be. And in that respect, it kind of forced me to be more self-compassionate with myself, because if I wasn't, I think I was just gonna maybe get stuck in this kind of pattern of disliking my own self and then maybe projecting that onto other people and being resentful towards other, like, Canadians. And I don't really think that's for me, like, the move. Like, I don't resent anybody who teased me for being Colombian. I think they were children who like myself weren't very mature, and you poke fun of the thing that's most evident, which seems to be my race. So it's one of those things that definitely has been that you grow with. You don't necessarily I think that's one thing I think a lot of white people don't necessarily maybe understand. You have to learn that you're a person of color sometimes as a kid, when you're growing up in somewhere like Canada. We don't see it. Kids don't see race. That's true. I didn't see it first. It didn't really it took a few years until I started to recognize it. Oh, snap, like, I'm being put into certain categories and or spaces that, okay, now this is giving me this kind of indication that, oh, I am a person of color. So that, in that respect, you kind of have to learn yourself in a different way, because you're not the normative in that respect. So that's where compassion kind of becomes a learning process.
Do you think finding that self-love for you as a kid was your form of self-compassion, or whenever you found that? Yeah,
no doubt. Like, self-compassion, right, is just having compassion for myself and, like, recognizing my own suffering in a way that actually, like, extends some sort of, like, patience to myself. Because in all fairness too, I think when I was like 17, 18, it's like I resented the fact that I had ever felt disgruntled about my race, and I felt like I was even leaning a bit, like, politically to the right in terms of, I was like, yeah, pick yourself up from your bootstraps, anyone can do it. But like, I was kind of buying into those ideas because I didn't want to have to buy into the reality that is, or accept the reality that, no, you know what, my experience has been different, and it's probably even more different from people who are black in the United States, where they have historic racism against their people. I mean, I'm lucky to say that there haven't really been many Colombians in Canada. It's not a systemic issue for me. It's more of a cultural issue for me.
For sure. Yeah, totally. When do you think you noticed that awareness that race existed as a kid? And when you were like, wow, okay, I'm different?
I still think it was that ESL thing. Like, I could not, because it was like, I knew I was from Colombia, and but I didn't really remember. I was 3 when I came here. I'm culturally pretty damn Canadian, and I knew. But the fact that, and I'm like 5 years old, and the teacher, and I remember, I'm very evident. I was one of the few kids who could write his damn name and, like, knew the ABCs. I'd been put in preschool, thank God, thank you, Mom and Dad, and they were putting me in a program. They're like, oh, it's just for a few days, just to see. And I was talking to the teacher and being like, what are you talking about? Like, I was like, I speak English. And they're like, no, but it's just like, it was, I don't know if it was the policy or what was up with it, or maybe I did have a little bit of an accent that I wasn't even aware of, in all fairness, I don't remember. And I did learn Spanish first. So, but the fact that there was an insistence, And then as we were kind of getting older, it seems like me and a lot of the non-white kids, like me, it was actually me and a few Korean and a Japanese kid, we actually became quite close when we were little. And I honestly, I think it's just because we kind of like recognize, we're like, oh yeah, I think we don't look like each other, but we don't look like them. Like, screw it. It's like, you know, it was like just like
an alliance.
Yeah. Just like a kind of an acknowledgement that okay, we are a little bit different. But it didn't, honestly, it was never a self-hating thing until I started becoming like a teenage, like when you start giving too many craps about how you look and, you know, you're trying to get girls and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And that's when it becomes a little bit more evident. Like really, like you start like, when a girl says, I like white guys, I think that's when I was like, what the? It's when you go, what? I don't think I'm one of those, and I'm pretty slick, so I'm discounted because I ain't white. Like, and then
God, and I was internalized idea.
And I was very like girl crazy my whole life. I still am a little bit too girl crazy, but in saying that, I think that those are like when people or peers, you know, say that kind of stuff, it hits you because you're like, what you. I understand if you say I don't like assholes, I don't like rude guys, I don't like you can even say I don't like ugly guys. Screw it, man. I don't, you know, it's all good. But when people say things like I only like white guys or I don't date brown guys, that like strikes a nerve. You're like, what are you talking about? Like you literally just group maybe 1 billion people or 100 million. I don't know how many people each race are, but and you just said That's the stuff that started to like hit me, and I started to notice that too when I was in high school.
Harmful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Extremely harmful. Like it's just like you said, it's completely just disregarded an entire race.
It's wild how normalized that shit is though, and how many young people feel very comfortable saying those kind of things. I go like, it's crazy, and I wasn't exactly the type to speak out back then, not at all.
But of course you noticed it.
Yeah, of course. You internalize it, like you said.
So how do you think that informed the way you showed self-compassion maybe at that age?
You know, honestly, I think at that age I didn't really practice a lot of self-compassion. I found myself to be, you know, I was very, you know, music-wise, I leaned a lot into music like punk rock and like stuff like Rage Against the Machine and Escape the Fate and System of a Down. Just like voices who seemed to be very much angst. You know, this kind of like teenage angst. You know, like Blink-182, Fall Out Boy, all that kind of stuff. I really leaned into that actually more than hip hop for a while, and I think it's because I didn't have a lot of compassion for myself, and I actually identified a lot with my own pain and maybe even pity, and it was very evident to me, you know, I was a late bloomer and stuff, so like I was shorter than all the girls, and you know, I fed my own pain into myself, I guess, like because it became almost like a part of my identity. It was like, oh yeah, I'm upset about things, that's who I am, me, I'm very teenage angsty, and you know, it still influences my music today. I'm still an angsty person, but back then it was very much identified with my angst, and in terms of even like maybe because of like racial prejudices might like also play a factor in that, but at a young age, you know, it's hard because everything feels like the end of the world. So when you're in a conflict or whatever, you can get wrapped up in it, and it's hard to find compassion for yourself. Instead, you kind of just hate yourself, and it's very easy to get stuck in a pattern of self-hate. And I extend this to every like young person out there and stuff, like don't let anyone's opinion of yourself like define who you are, because that shit is meaningless in the future. Obviously don't go around burning bridges and stuff, but like but people's opinions don't matter, and to me they mattered way too much, way too much. Why? Because I was a kid, man. And you know, that's hard.
It seems like they can definitely like compromise your identity and like who you are, like your true self.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you kind of find that the same though? Being like, I feel like still the same goes for like young women especially, because the opinion of how you should look is just so predominant in the media. And like you internalize the idea of like, yo, you're not it enough. And it's crazy because I hate that they put actors who are 25 years old playing 15-year-old.
At Riverdale.
At Riverdale. Yo, you guys are doing a disservice to kids everywhere around the world. That shit is toxic. I hate it. I don't like to see it.
No.
I see it. I go, are you kidding me? You know how many... I was a young actor. You know how many young actors want to play their own age? Every one of them. And I dislike and I don't know if hate is a strong enough word, but I very much am repugnant to people who casting directors. You're putting adults. These are adult males. These guys got biceps like this big, man. They should not be anywhere, any high school.
No.
That's a crime, okay? That man, if he peed there, he would go to jail. He'd be a sex offender, okay? That man is an adult man. He has a beard, okay?
100%.
But yeah, no, that representation, I think, in that point, it's very important.
I'm still unlearning all of that stuff, you know? It's a daily practice for myself to, you know, Instagram is still trying to socially condition me to think those things. And it's like, I need to look like I have like a tiny waist, a big ass, and like titties, you know? Like, and
Facts.
that's not what puts value in me. But that is what Instagram, especially at least my understanding with women, that's where our value lies. And we're much more than that. Like, obviously there's beauty, but there's inner beauty. And we are our own beings beyond our body.
Yeah. But yeah, also just like understanding that like these influences are very negative, and they can be, and just, it's hard to find self-compassion. And that's why I do genuinely, I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for kids who have felt like outsiders, who don't, I was lucky enough. I was never the target of bullying I was never like the kid who got bullied. I experienced bullying like anyone else. You know, I never had to be put into a category that made me submissive to other kids, because man, teenagers and kids can be just ruthless out there. And in all fairness, again, like you're saying, media representation, all that, I see all that. It's like media and everyone like poking buttons. They're just trying to make people emotionally sensitive to the point where we can control them. You know, make people reactive and insecure.
Especially with social media, like they are looking for us to consume. They want us to buy their product to make us a certain way. Yeah. You know, our entire society is kind of built on that, is us being inadequate, that we need an external thing, but really all we need is what's within us.
Facts.
Yeah. Really.
That's some Buddhism right there. Yeah. But
it's true though. Like the energy that we can create and finding self-validation within, that is the most important thing. And I think with that, we can expand and create self-expression. And that's through art and so many different medias. And that's when people find that feeling of competency and like mastery and like, I am worth something. This is my worth and this is my expression.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like finding a purpose and expressing it and all that. That's what I'm trying to do with music. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How do you find self-compassion as a artist?
If you want to be an artist, you got to be prepared to fail forever. And I mean that very literally. Like, the process of creating something and putting it out for people to listen to, or for no one to listen to, if you're doing it for some external validation, I promise you will forever fail. And it won't be the kind of failure that leads you into some place where you wake up and go, oh, I succeeded. No. That'll be just, you will fail. But if you can do this thing, if you can do music, and I'm still trying to find it, right? If I'm still trying to find how I can be making music for myself through self-expression, while obviously still making music that bangs for other people who can like vibe with it, that obviously it's a little balance, then you can validate yourself through the work, and you can actually, like, when the work itself and you actually, the process of it and the creation, you know, like the funky quote, oh, the journey, it's all about the journey. Yeah, in that respect with music, if you're doing it for the end goal, you should just stop, because it's not for you. But if you want to do this because if there's nothing else that you can do, for me, I can't, when I'm sitting at home and it's whatever night, you know, like the other night I was up till 4 a.m., actually 4:30, just because I had to do it. I had to make music. It was like, for me, it's a matter of therapy, right? So for me, music is how I am compassionate with myself. I don't go to therapy. Maybe I should. I think everyone should, actually. But that's beside the point. I'm not going to. Music for me is my therapy. That's the space where I can go, all right, man, you just had a tough breakup, or you just had a tough week, or whatever the hell's going on. This is my space where I can create something, and for me, that's being compassionate to myself and my suffering, is that I've developed a way where I can express myself that is therapeutic in every respect of that word, while also being like cathartic, right? But also, I'm no longer doing it for validation. And I think a lot of the time when we begin, we just want someone to go, hey, good song, you know? And in all fairness, that's just dope too. It's amazing when people can connect with what you've put out. But music had to become, and again, it's a process, and it's still ongoing, where I have to learn to stop creating for other people and instead focus on an internal kind of therapeutic creative process that then kind of in a way helps me way more, and actually people end up liking that shit way more too. It's more authentic.
Authenticity is it's powerful.
Be yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sound like an after school special kind of. Be yourself.
Hey children, be yourself. Don't be someone else. Don't do drugs. So how did you, Jen, learn about self-compassion? Like why self-compassion, you know?
Well, I mentioned this in the first podcast, and I first heard it, well, maybe I didn't first hear it, but I reheard it in therapy, and my therapist just asked me what it meant to me. And ever since, I've been really curious about it. And what I feel that I've learned is that it's a overarching framework that can be applied to anything, whether that's mental health, whether that's your daily life. It's just an engagement with yourself and other things. It's a way to experience things that is kind to yourself.
It's not the same as self-pity though, right? Like, I feel like sometimes if you say self-compassion, someone goes like, you can have the tendency to think like, oh, okay, yeah, like feeling bad for yourself, you know? But like, I feel like that's not the same though, right?
I think it's sometimes important to revel in your emotions. I think it can be unhealthy when it becomes an identity and like a piece that's always with you, but allowing yourself to throw a pity party.
Yeah.
That's okay sometimes, because sometimes life is really hard, and sometimes we go through really unimaginable things that are just like before we couldn't even like understand.
Yeah, sure.
So letting yourself feel that and letting it move through, that's self-compassion. That is okay, because we're human beings. We can't always be happy and positive all the time, and
what
we don't experience bad.
I'm always happy and positive all the time.
All the time. Yeah, but you know, like, gotta let those things come and go.
Yeah, but it just goes to show, I think, that the self-identification with pain rarely leads you to a positive place, regardless of how it began. And again, like, yeah, like even myself, it's never a positive time when I'm, you know, pitying myself to an extent that's not healthy. Like, obviously, I make sad songs. That's my pity party, you know. Bitch, you know, whatever it is, you know. But you can't also, like, you know, I think it's so important to stress, at least in my message and my philosophy, you can't become a victim to your own life. Because I promise everyone, if you victimize yourself, I promise you will become a victim. In every situation of your life, you will be a victim.
100%.
And that's not to take away from real victims of crime, of rape, whatever. That's real.
It doesn't take away from
it. But don't victimize yourself in your own life, you know? Like, the amount of crappy things that have happened, you know, not necessarily to me, but people around me. I've lost friends, I've lost family in some quite horrific and traumatic ways. If I victimize myself or identified with my pain to an extent where I can't be myself, it almost, you know, I'm not serving myself any positive function.
It compromises you.
Yeah, exactly. Straight up.
That whole victimization, I've seen it with kids a lot. And it all starts somewhere. You know, people aren't just born into victimizing themselves. That's not just a behavior you learn by yourself. You learn it through conditioning. You learn it through modeling of other behavior. You learn it through traumatic experiences. And when like those things happen, that becomes your world. And it's really just a lesson, and it's something that really needs to be addressed, like socially, on all platforms. At least that's what I believe.
Yeah, definitely.
To get yourself out of that, because it's not their fault. But
No, yeah. It's like you said. It's often it's like some modeling somewhere in your early life. Something started to happen where becoming identified as being a victim. Maybe your parents identified you as such, or whatever it was. It becomes, I think, like Eckhart Tolle, great spiritual teacher.
Yeah.
You'd say that you can become almost, there's a part of your ego body, your pain body, that actually likes it. It almost likes feeling pain, and being a victim is a painful experience.
100%.
So if you consistently victimize yourself, that piece of you, that pain body, that shit feeds on it. It really does. And I've seen it in myself. I can see it in, I can see it in other people, and definitely in kids. That's true. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I was definitely like that as a angsty teen. I was the victim because of just traumatic experiences I had as a kid.
Yeah.
And it's just easy to get into that routine because you become comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah, that's a good line right there. Yeah. You're comfortable with discomfort. Yeah, I'm gonna steal that. Yeah. No, I like that
though. Make a song about it.
No, totally. It's like how we just recreate the same kind of relationships that we tended to have as kids, or like this. If you have an abusive pattern or whatever with your family or with your parents, you'll tend to recreate that in the relationships you have now. Or if you were victimized as a kid, to whatever extent or whatever extremity, you tend to want to recreate those patterns as an adult, however unhealthy they might be. Yeah.
Do you think there's a link between victimization and self-compassion?
Definitely. It's probably a hard one though, because not a hard one, but it's a complex one, because I think that, well, self-compassion, right, it's like you're being compassionate with yourself. So somewhere in there's an acknowledgement that you might be in pain, right? Like, let's say I'm suffering. Let's say for example, let's say I just lost someone close to me. I'm in pain right now, and I probably need some self-compassion. I need to be compassionate to myself that I might not be my 100% in school. I might not be 100% there at work, and I need to be patient with myself to the degree where I can't expect myself to be the best bartender or a student that I usually would be.
I agree.
But maybe a lack of self-compassion and an over-identification with pain, without the kind of because self-compassion at the end of the day, right? It's not like a wallowing in your pity. There's a part in there that goes, hey, it's okay. Here, I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to have respect for the self to want to push you and help you get out of this, I could have very easily have misconstrued my entire childhood of not necessarily loving myself because of my own issues, because, don't get me wrong, I lived in Canada, and I didn't like my curly hair because, it wasn't necessarily media represented. And yes, it's true, because I live in a place where white is the norm. But if I had over-identified with that narrative, I think it'd be very easy for me to say that, it would be very easy for me to become a victim of my life. And honestly, I don't think that gets me. It would get me or anyone else very far. You're not going to become an inspiration to other people if you can't deal with your own pain. The most inspiring people are those who've lived through things like the Holocaust or things like systemic oppression, and the ones who rise above it. But pain can serve a reformative purpose where where I feel it, I'm going to be compassionate, and it doesn't necessarily leave, but I'm not going to identify with it. I'm going to use that pain to feel a social movement or whatever it might be. Not, I'm gonna sit here and be upset and then blame everything else that goes bad in my life on that same pain. That's not, that ain't what I'm about, and it's not what I'm trying to push at all.
Yeah. Let's shed some light on gender and how that informed how you understand self-compassion.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting one. I think I mentioned this earlier. I was very girl crazy. Even as a little kid, like, my parents would describe me as a toddler with our, like, caretaker in Colombia. This is when I was, like, 1 to 3.5. Where it's like, oh, anytime she's around, I was just, like, in love with her, and I always had to be around her. So kind of, you know, outside of my attachment with my mom, I'm already attaching to the caretaker who would come in some days.
Yeah.
Like, I always felt very identified with women, actually. And throughout my entire early elementary school, my best friends, you know, were these girls, and they were girls. And of course, you know, I had a few male friends, but even now, I think I can count more female friends than I can male. I was such a mama's boy. I love my mama, and, like, you know, if she's my idol, well, then of course I love women, like, you know, and that was an identity for me. But then, you know, as you get older and stuff, like, you know, women become different. You know, they become sexualized, and and then gender becomes more apparent to me, and I start realizing that, oh my God, I don't necessarily feel like, you know, then gender, you start recognizing it's a bit of a performance. What does it mean to be male or a man? What does it mean to be a woman? And actually, when I was like 19 or 20, I started going to university. That's actually when I started to realize that I was very distanced from kind of like maybe the masculine respect of gender. And I don't mean that, like, it was almost like I like took a step back and said, oh shit, it's like I've been performing it well enough in respect that I'm like, oh, he works out, he's athletic, you know, I get girls. That, you know, these shallow things were enough for me to, like, then never have to have a question. But then when I was like, holy crap, I don't actually know if I know how to, like, have that many guy friends. You know, having male friends and female friends is different. I hang out with my girlfriends, like, we have wine, chill out and talk, and, like, you know, whatever. It's very, like, centered on the what's being said, and I'm a talkative person. When you male relationships have been different. Like, it's like doing things together and, like, these activities, you know, like, oh, you're shotgunning beers together, whatever it looks like. It felt like I had to, like, learn it a little bit, like, get comfortable with the reality that, like, oh my God, maybe I haven't actually had enough close male friends. It's silly, but it's like I don't know sometimes where I fit in, because I'm like, I want to believe that, oh my God, I've been on your side, women, you know, I've been with you guys. But at the same time, yeah, I can say derogatory things. I'm not necessarily a champion of any side. I'm very an individual in that respect. So when it comes to self-compassion, it's like, am I being compassionate with my male self? You know, is there a gender element to myself that I'm being compassionate of? Am I expecting too much? I don't know. And I hope, honestly, for anyone who listens to my music, who listens to me, who listens to this podcast, like, again, these ideas of men and women, they can be helpful for some people. But if it doesn't apply to you, don't let it. Like, it doesn't have to. You don't have to let. Oh, you don't want to play with that? That's all good. You don't want to dress that way? That's all good. I'm wearing purple shoes, for Christ's sake. Like, you know, like, I clearly am not making. You know, I don't care. You know, pink, purple shirt. I love purple.
Purple hair.
Purple hair. Purple, yeah.
So Esteban, I have another question. How do you think your parents' behavior has taught you or informed you about self-compassion?
First, I'll shout out Mama and Papa. Love you guys. You know, I was very lucky to grow up in a 2-parent household. I think just seeing my parents together, and for the most part, just kind of having this kind of old school Colombian Catholic kind of view on love and compassion, where it's kind of, they almost see it as like a duty to each other. It was like, you know, it was one of those things where it's like, being together forever is not a matter of even love. But, you know, obviously that is there, and I'm happy that it is. But it's the sense of duty. And in that same respect, I guess, when it came to, like, valuing myself and how I spoke to myself and how they would speak to me too, it's in a very, like, respectful way. And respect is a huge thing down there in Colombia, just when it comes to, like, authority figures and parents and even family members. Respétame, you know, that's what my mom says. Respect me. but it's very real in the respect, in the sense, sorry, that you have to, like, I was very much taught that respect is given. That kind of self-respect transmuted into a self-love, self-compassionate way, where you have to understand that if you really have respect for yourself and for other people, you're probably going to be a compassionate person. I talk to my dad's experience and my mom's as well, but I say that they live the Canadian dream, the American dream or whatever, but the Canadian version of that, where he comes here with some cash, doesn't even know what he's going to do. He came here thinking he was going to work in the import-export business of Colombian goods. Comes here, he's educated, thank God. But within, the reality of, oops, sorry, guess what? Canadians don't want Colombian products. He had to figure out real quick, and that's what we are. We're quick thinkers, and my dad's a quick thinker, and that kind of business mindset where you're always adapting to your environment and always working working in a country where you've never been. He'd never even been to Canada. In fact, he chose Vancouver because the pamphlet looked nice. That's silly, but I hear those things and I go, the world is a different place for our parents, and it was, especially for immigrant parents, where they had to make a decision where they go, you know what, Colombia, the most dangerous place on earth during the time, actually more dangerous than an active war zone. To think about that, there was a war going on, Iraq or the Gulf at that time in the 90s. It was safer. You had a lesser chance of being killed if you were there as a civilian than if you were in Medellin, Colombia. That's where my parents were. So that's what they obviously made a decision where they had to leave for our safety and for our well-being, and it's something that I don't even know if I could do that myself, because it's something that's so absurd to go to a foreign country you've never been to with no real plan, just kind of you go on a limb. But that kind of resilient attitude that they always had, and that work ethic fostered something in me where I could never loathe in my own self-pity for too long, because, or not never, maybe never is a strong word, but at least seeing them was always a reminder of, holy shit, I shouldn't be doing it, because if these people can do this kind of stuff and face adversity that I can't imagine and witness like genuine trauma and murder that is unspeakable, and they can do that and come here and foster a life and learn a new language and develop all their skills in that respect in a new culture, then I sure as hell can pick myself up and stop feeling sorry for myself, but give myself enough respect to treat myself well, to take care of myself.
So it's kind of that resiliency and respect correlation that gives you an avenue to self-compassion. Exactly.
And I think everybody is different, right? I'm a shithead, so I need to have respect, namely first and foremost for my parents, and that's a foundation from which I can then respect myself enough to treat myself like I really do have a limitless potential.
Well, it seems like they've really impacted you, which isn't a surprise, but is also a blessing for you.
That's absolutely true, but I won't let them know it.
Yeah. Well, Esteban, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And just being so yourself and bringing so much to the table. This was such a freaking neat conversation. And I hope the viewers out there enjoyed it as well. Just thank you so much.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah.
Jen, producer, Rio Darko, Joe Oguni. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I just want to say one thing to any listeners who know me. Be authentic, be yourself, and if you let the opinions of other people control you, you're never going to be happy. So try to look for it in you,
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap, baby.